Charles Schulz's Peanuts is a masterclass in how to do a comic strip. This week, Kumar and I are focusing on a 5-year period of Schulz's career from 1957 to 1961, and 25 Sunday strips that demonstrate Schulz's skill at dialogue-free comics. The strips we're going to be talking about are all linked from the show notes, and you might want to read them before listening. First, if you appreciate the work we do on deconstructing comics and our other podcasts and want bonus content, we'd love it if you'd support the show at patreon.com/deconcomics for as little as $2 a month. Our monthly issue-by-issue look at 1960s Amazing Spider-Man comics is available to patrons chipping in at least $4 a month. Coming at the end of this month, we discuss the final Steve Ditko issue. Check out our goals and rewards and pledge your support now at patreon.com/deconcomics. This is Tim.
And this is Kumar.
And this is Deconstructing Comics. Welcome to Deconstructing Comics. This is Tim in Tokyo with Kumar in Melbourne. I never stumble over the beginning.
It's just me. I don't know if it's psychological or what, but I cannot say the name of our show.
You have to change the
years.
name.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of way back in history, so we're talking about Peanuts this time, which we haven't done on this show since we discussed the David Michaelis bio of Schulz, which was 14 frickin' years ago.
Wait a second. Didn't we do... I'm sure we did a Peanuts episode, because I read every single strip. I read all 15,000 strips, or however many there are.
Did we do another Peanuts?
I'm quite sure we did, after the Michaelis book.
It seems to have slipped from my memory, but...
All right, I'm sure. Unless I'm imagining it. But I feel like it... I remember I read every single strip in preparation for the show.
Every single strip, like in a book, or...
I downloaded them, and then I just read every single one, and maybe I did that just for fun.
Oh, okay, I found it. Episode 482, Peanuts, a 20th Century Classic.
Okay.
And I guess this was you and me?
Yep.
Yeah, Tim and Kumar come back to Peanuts. Okay, I've forgotten about this one. This is, when was this? 2016.
2016, yeah.
Okay, so it was eight years after the Michaelis. So every 8 years we do a Peanuts episode, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, what did we choose here?
And Michaelis was a two-parter.
Yeah.
I don't think we chose. I think we read we read as much as we could, I think.
Yeah, I guess we just read a lot of strips.
Yeah. Yeah.
Randomly. Huh, okay. Wow, I'd completely forgotten about this one. All right. Anyway, so this time we're talking about Peanuts. Now, this episode was inspired by the weekly podcast Unpacking Peanuts, where 3 cartoonists, Michael Cohen, Jimmy Gownley, and Harold Buchholz, spend 2 one-hour episodes, one a week, going over their favorite strips from each year of Peanuts. And at first I was just sort of following along on the strips that they selected, looking in my Fantagraphics books, and then I reached a point where I found that I had left a bookmark in the 1959 to 60 volume, and I'd never come back to it. So now I've just been reading everything since that point. And they just finished 1962 as we're recording this. Now, in 61, when they were talking about 61, the strip that blew away both me and them, and people that I shared it with on Facebook, it seems like, was the Sunday, April 16th, 1961 strip. And I shared it on the Deconstructing Comics Facebook group, and that inspired me to... At first, I suggested to Kumar, maybe we could do a whole podcast episode on just this one strip. But I thought, well, I'm not quite sure if it's that packed with meaning, so I expanded it to cover various dialogue-free Sunday Peanut strips between 1957 and 1961. And I came up with 25.
Is this the most narrowed down specific topic we've ever done on this show?
Possibly. I don't know. Obviously, I don't remember every single episode because I'd forgotten about that second Peanuts one.
Yeah.
But
It seems like the Nancy strip about the three rocks. That's about as like narrowed down as you can get. But this feels like it almost felt close, like when you suggested like the Wordless Sundays, because it's not even all the Wordless Sundays. It's just from 57 to 61. So it's even a narrow window of Silent Sundays, I guess.
Yeah, so you can kind of see, if you look at just this 5-year segment, you can see still kind of in transition from what it was in the early 50s, Peanuts, to what it became like in the later 60s and afterward. Especially if you look at the 57 ones, because, Charlie Brown, Snoopy, they look just a little bit different from, they don't look as different as they did in 1951, but they're not quite the sort of ideal of what we think of for those characters. And so I'm going to link to all 25 of these from the show notes. I don't think we're going to touch on all 25. We've sort of marked out the ones that we have the most to say about. But yeah, by the time you get to 61, you can see, well, some of them are earlier, but a lot of the tropes of the strip are coming in. Lucy's pulling away the football already in the late 50s. We get the psychiatrist booth around this time. The Great Pumpkin starts coming up. So, but Snoopy is not fighting the Red Baron yet. That's later in the 60s.
Well, okay, this leads right into the topic, because I had a question about, was Snoopy chasing Linus's blanket a thing in the daily strips? Because it seems to be in these Sundays, it's some of them, because we're going to talk about some of them, but some of them there's almost no joke except that they fight each other over the blanket.
There might have been somewhat, but I think with the Sundays, obviously there's more room to stretch it out. You can't do a very big gag in 4 panels.
Right.
There might have been. But yeah, there's a surprising number of Snoopy and Linus fighting over the blanket strips among these. As I was looking at these, and I divided them into 3 categories, and one of them was Snoopy versus Linus, and they're like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 strips in that category. They're not all about the blanket. Like the first one from February 10th, 57, Snoopy is watching Linus eat a candy bar and waiting to get some of it, but then Linus just puts his blanket over his head and doesn't give Snoopy any. Yeah.
But that one was quite... I like that one because it was like real dog behavior, like a dog wanting to eat something that it's not supposed to eat.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed like actual... It's really... You can tell it's early Peanuts because he's not fighting the Red Baron and doing all sorts of stuff that dogs don't do.
Yeah.
He's acting like a real dog.
Mm-hmm.
So I did quite like that one. But then the other ones are... I don't know, they have a fight and like Linus's hair gets messed up or something, and that seems to be the whole gag.
Well, that one where they're blowing on each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's June 30th of 57. And it ends up Snoopy blows on Linus from behind, and he has his hair combed back all the time, but then when Snoopy blows on it, then Linus's hair goes over his eyes, and that's the gag.
Yeah.
So, these early ones, you get kind of a feel of it being more just kind of a generic strip about kids in the 50s. And I had that feeling about the one with Charlie Brown sliding on the ice, too, which I put in the cute vignettes category. You had something to say about that one?
No, I actually think that one is really awesome. Because it does something... Okay, so we see Charlie Brown walking on... Something else we should mention, too, is that because these are the Sundays, you have to assume that some newspapers were cutting off the top tier and only printing the bottom 2 tiers. So it's there's some interesting construction going on with some of these. But anyway, it's what you would call instant-to-instant panels. So Charlie Brown walking along, he comes to the edge of the front edge of a frozen like patch of ice. Then the next panel, he's looking down at the ice, but he's in the middle. And then next panel, he's walking past it. And it's broken into panels, but it's actually one geographical strip. And then he's passing it, he's looking past, and then he's walking past, and finally he stops, but he's he's walked further away. We can tell because it's still the same geographical location. Then in the next tier down, the final tier, he stops and thinks. He's still thinking. He turns. He looks. Next panel, he looks back at the ice. Next panel, he runs back, and then he slides across it in one panel, back in the direction he came from. Then he slides back in the direction he was originally heading, and then he wanders off with as if nothing, with no emotional reaction. Yeah. But okay, so there's so much going on here. So first, the instant-to-instant paneling is very cinematic and something you normally associate with manga, like Osamu Tezuka or someone, where you get every corner of a person's face as the camera kind of swings around them or something like that. You don't really see. I don't normally see it in Peanuts. Don't see it in American comics in general, and I love the way it's so slow in the second tier, where you see every instant of him walking across, and then there's a sudden acceleration in the last two panels where he goes back and forth in two panels in a row. He skids to both sides, and I love the really Peanuts final panel where he has had a moment of pure joy, bliss in his life, but it's like there's no reveling in it. It's just, he just walks away from it. He had that moment, and that's kind of it. There's no bliss that comes out of it, if you know what I mean. Like, it's all internalized somehow.
Yeah, he doesn't smile or anything.
Yeah, I think it's really fascinating in every way. Even though it's almost the same panel, like, every drawing is almost the same. It's the same size panel with Charlie Brown in the middle of it, walking with this hill of snow in the background.
And by the way, he's wearing this winter coat with fur on it and a furry hat, looks kind of like a Russian outfit. And you never saw him wear anything like this in the later years.
Right. Right.
So yeah, that kind of sticks out too. Like, why is he wearing this Russian getup?
Yeah.
But yeah, there are several, getting back to Snoopy and Linus, where Linus has his blanket and Snoopy grabs it, and maybe he's dragging Linus around by it, or Linus does something tricky to keep it away from Snoopy. And you can look at these and kind of see Peanuts getting a little bit more absurd as you go. Because, so November 24th, 57, Snoopy grabs the blanket and he is dragging Linus, and they crash inside Snoopy's doghouse, and at the end, the doghouse it's still standing, but it's not in very good shape, and Linus is walking away looking all beat up and carrying his blanket, where by the time you get to just a year later, December 14th, 58, Snoopy drags Linus around by the blanket, and then Linus catches on all this other debris that he's dragging around, the fence and the street sign and bushes.
Yeah, but how? I actually wondered about this one, because I was like, how did he end up pulling that whole fence down? Because we see him pull him away from Snoopy pulls Linus away from the tree by the blanket, and then I guess they crash through town, but we don't see all this stuff kind of piling up. It did seem like slightly silly, that it didn't make logistical sense like the other ones did. And the gag again is just that, they're a mess, like that one in 11/24/57 is just that Snoopy drags Linus back into his house and they both end up messed up at the end, and that's kind of it. Look what a mess they are. That's kind of the joke of it. I find that these ones work really well if there is a bystander of some sort. If one of the other kids shows up to some degree to do something, they work a lot better than if it's just Linus and Snoopy. Like, there's one where they crash into the doghouse again. The doghouse goes tumbling down a hill. Charlie Brown hears this and runs out, and then he sees them walking away, and Linus is actually riding on Snoopy carrying a white flag of surrender. And now Charlie
made of
Brown's
his blanket,
face
I imagine.
Yeah. And Charlie Brown's face is completely impassive. Like, he's got no, he's like, he doesn't, it's not like disbelief or whatever. It's just like looking at it blankly, which I love. And I love having him there as a witness, and I love his distress when he hears the noise and runs out. Even though we don't have any sound effects, it's a really good indicator that he can hear what's going on.
Yeah, when the doghouse goes rolling down the hill with the two of them in it, it crashes into a tree, and you've got pieces of doghouse and Snoopy and Linus flying every direction.
Yeah.
not pieces of the characters. They're intact, but...
Yeah, it really works because for me that one works because Charlie Brown is in it.
Interesting.
And also the one in 7/13/58, which we flagged, is a genius one where he throws his blanket through a window while Snoopy is chasing him, and then he turns around and shows his empty hands, and Snoopy's like, "Where'd the blanket go?" And there's a hilarious punchline in the final panel of this. It's just unbelievable. It's perfect, and the staging of it is perfect, and the pacing is perfect. But again, having other kids somehow sucked into the madness maybe is what makes it a bit more, it makes it funnier, maybe.
Yeah.
Because it's not just my hair's messed up or whatever. There's more going on.
Yeah, and in particular, it's the blanket is draped over Schroeder's head as he's sitting at his piano, and Lucy is there leaning on it. And it's like, we were doing this one Peanuts trope of Snoopy and Linus and the blanket, and now suddenly we're in a different Peanuts trope.
Yes, it's still happening in another part of the universe. All the other things are happening in other places at the same time. It's like there's a whole Peanuts universe.
It kind of reminded me of, I mean, this is really obscure, or I don't know if you can make a connection here, but it reminded me of Blazing Saddles with the movie studio thing. You know, suddenly you're in a completely different setting.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, this is a completely different setting from the same universe, but still it's kind of surprising that suddenly you're there.
It's a real shock ending, yeah.
Because usually in Peanuts, you're staying in one setting the whole time.
Yeah.
One trope.
Yeah.
Like, you know, the psychiatry booth or the football or the Red Baron or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. It really, I don't know. But I mean, you need to be familiar with the strip for it to work. But I mean, it works so well. I mean,
right, yeah, if you don't know who Lucy and Schroeder are, it doesn't work.
If you don't know this is the way they're always sitting, and this is their story that goes on half the time.
Yeah, and Lucy and Schroeder is one of the earliest tropes of the strip, too.
Right.
That starts, you know, well, I mean, Lucy is a baby in the early days, but within, like, the first 5 years, I think, you know, Schroeder's playing the piano, and Lucy is paying attention to that. I also wanted to talk about, so November 24th, 57, if you notice something about the kind of still 50s-ishness of the strip, that you can see, like, neighborhood houses drawn in detail, which, you know, in the 50s, Schulz was putting a lot more detail in the strip, and he was drawing things from different angles, like when Snoopy and Linus are going into the doghouse, you see it kind of from the corner of the doghouse. You can see the front and the side, which, you know, later you're always getting straight on from the side. You know, every scene. So I think he decided he needed to save time. So let's do a little detail as we need to do, and just draw straight on from the side all the time. But it's interesting to see it. You know, it's kind of like Doonesbury in reverse, where you're going to less detail.
Yeah. It's the neighborhood's really interesting. All those houses are interesting in this.
Yep.
There's another one that we'll talk about later when they're Charlie and Snoopy are chasing a baseball, and they run up through an alley, like almost towards the camera, and it's almost, looking back, it's almost shocking to see. Sometimes the strip functions based on it being two-dimensional. Like there's one, I don't know if we flagged it, but there's one where Linus is dragging his sled up a snowy hill, and he comes to a tree, and he's like, okay, I'll go around it. And he goes around it, and he goes in, he gets to the other side of the tree as he's going up the hill, and then he looks up the hill, he looks back at the tree, and he's like, no, I'm going to hit that tree, and he turns back and walks back down the hill in a gloomy kind of depression. But because it only works because it's two-dimensional, because he could just move over a few feet.
He lives in a flat world.
Yeah. If you just move forward, you know, towards us, he could just slide down the hill safely.
Well, is that a bit of a wink at the audience because you're reading this in two dimensions?
Well, it could be that, or it could be that the world of Peanuts is so cruel that he knows no matter how he comes at it, he's going to slide in, it's going to curve into the tree and hit it, which is a better gag And maybe that's what the intention was. But yeah, it depends on that. But then you see these other strips that were maybe earlier that were, you actually see things from a 3/4 angle or whatever. So later on, I mean, Snoopy's house is a perfect example. It was really the way he sleeps on the roof. The point of the roof has always been like a weird thing that only emerged in the later 2-dimensional version of Peanuts. And you can't really see him sleeping on the roof in the way they fly into it here on November 24th, 1957.
No, I think it's like really late 50s before he starts sleeping on the roof. Before that, you always see him in the doghouse like a real dog.
Right.
Yeah, the sled one, it's interesting because you see him kind of following the process of working through the plan, and then he has that moment where he realizes, no, if I come sliding down here, I'm going to hit the tree. And he's looking at the tree, like, right up next to it, and his eyes are big, and like, okay.
And his depression in the last panel is such perfect Peanuts.
Yeah, and of course he sighs.
Yeah, he sighs. It's such great Peanuts, It's a perfect distillation of the strip. And I'm surprised it wasn't Charlie Brown in that strip, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like Charlie Brown would not notice and actually crash into the tree.
yeah, maybe so.
Yeah, there are several that I think I'll put in the characters facing adversity category that are really like Lucy character pieces. I had flagged August 31st of 58, where Lucy has a musical teddy bear, and she's walking down the street carrying this teddy bear, and music's coming out of it, and suddenly it stops, and she shakes it a little bit, doesn't work, so she whaps it against a fire hydrant, and then it starts working again.
And then she walks away.
She's not going to take no for an answer.
Yeah, I love this one because it's such a... It's supposed to be pretty music coming from a cute doll, a cute teddy bear, with pretty little notes coming out of it. And her response is to be this violent act of smashing it against the fire hydrant.
Yes.
So you've got this horrible, ugly moment, this moment of cruelty, juxtaposed with the moment of what's supposed to be cuteness and beauty. And
cute little girl with a teddy bear. Yeah,
it's another really great Peanuts moment. It's really... this era of Peanuts is so amazing, really.
Yeah. And let's see, there were a few others in that category. January 18th, 59. Lucy makes a snowball that she tries to throw at Charlie Brown, and her arm is really bad. She throws it about 1 foot.
Yeah, and misfires somehow.
And so then plan B is walk over to Charlie Brown and kick him.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't even it's like the snowball wasn't even the point. It's like she wants him to suffer, or she wants to be she wants to be the one that harms him in some way. And it didn't have to be a snowball. It didn't have to be Winter. She just wanted to hurt him. And the snowball failed, so she just walks up and kicks him. I laughed so hard. It was so mean. But it's so much like the teddy bear. It's just so perfectly in character, and it's kind of amazing that that one's got really great staging and pacing, and you never know what's going to happen. I never saw that punchline coming. Not for a million years. It was really amazing, really great. Yeah.
Coming up, the 1961 strip that really blew us away. Dialogue from a serious adult situation turned into comedy gold, the Peanuts pose I took note of as a kid, and more. But first, a reminder to join us for 20th Century TV and music trivia quiz videos and more on our Patreon page. Every month, patrons donating $4 a month or more also get a full-length podcast episode reviewing an issue of The Amazing Spider-Man by Lee and Ditko. This weekend, we'll discuss the final Ditko issue, number 38, and we're going to keep going through John Romita Sr.'s first 12 issues to see how the characters and story directions changed post-Ditko. Check out our goals and rewards at patreon.com/deconcomics. If you'd rather give a one-time donation, you can do so via PayPal by sending it to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. We appreciate your support.
You like cheap comic books, right? Well, I'm Professor Allen, and I talk about cheap comic books on the Quarter Bin Podcast. In every episode, I'll dissect a single comic from my collection, as long as I paid no more than 25 cents for the issue. Forget about $4 new comics that you can read in 4 minutes, or crossover events that can cost $100 to collect. Join me in the Quarter Bin, where even bad comics are a bargain, and good ones are a steal. The Quarter Bin Podcast is part of the Relatively Geeky Podcast Network. Visit us at relativelygeekypodcast.blogspot.com or search Relatively Geeky or Quarter Bin Podcast in iTunes. I guarantee it'll be worth every penny.
And there's another one. Oh, I put it in the cute vignettes category. April 26, 59, where Lucy is putting together a catapult, and just a little tiny seesaw, not very big. It's just some kind of a fulcrum to it, and she puts something on the other end and hits it, and then you pull back and you see behind her Linus is building a sandcastle, and whatever rock or whatever she has catapulted over there has messed up the sandcastle, and Linus is flipping over in classic Peanuts style.
Yeah. Okay, so it starts out with her collecting a log and some sticks, and you don't even know what she's doing. It's just a bunch of weird activities. And then she starts to assemble this thing, and you're like, what is this thing she's putting together? And then finally you realize, I think it's maybe only even in the last panel, that she's really made this elaborate catapult, which works backwards. She doesn't even see what she's inflicting, but she's so determined to inflict this cruelty on her brother that she's created this thing that she flicks backwards over her head, so she doesn't even see it. She doesn't care, and she, as usual, has no emotional reaction to this. She's satisfied on the inside, but there's no glee. There's no external glee from her about this thing that she's perpetrated. She just wanted to make him suffer. And she doesn't even have to see it happening. It's astonishing.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the one that inspired us here.
Okay.
April 16th, 1961. So I'm going to describe this panel by panel. So
okay.
the top tier, the part that some newspapers cut off, first you've got the title, and Schroeder playing his piano, and Frida, who is a pretty new character at this point, is leaning on the piano. Then
I couldn't even remember her name.
Yeah, Frida, with naturally curly hair.
Does she ever, did she disappear from the strip at some stage?
I don't know, because I disappeared from the strip when I left for Japan. So
right.
I'm not sure how much. She probably wasn't in the 90s very much, I don't think. What little I've seen of the 90s strips, it seems like it's pretty much all Charlie Brown, Snoopy, Linus, Lucy, Peppermint Patty, maybe Marcy, who of course don't exist yet at this point.
Right.
But yeah, I'm not sure what happened to the other characters. Anyway, so then you see Lucy walking up to the door, and she comes in, and then in the part that every newspaper carries, the first panel of the second tier, Lucy comes in and sees Frida leaning on the piano, which, hey, that's her place. And Lucy is super shocked. Not only are her eyes big, but there's it's a side view, so you can't really see big eyes, but you can see multiple lines behind her eyes and 3 big sweat marks coming off of her head and a big downturned mouth. She's just traumatized. And there's a panel of her just standing there looking dazed. And then she's walking out with her head down and a word balloon that just has some scratchings in it. This black mess of lines.
Gloom. It's the symbol of gloom, I would describe it as. It's just the symbol of depression. It's just a squiggle.
Yeah. And
or it's worse than a squiggle. It's a blotch. It's a black...
It looks like a big patch of long grass, kind of.
Yeah.
So then she's back outside in that panel. And now next panel, she's sitting on the curb with Snoopy. And not only do they both have that gloom in their balloons, but the balloons are joined. So Snoopy is really, empathizing with her.
Yeah.
And then we have a panel where Snoopy is kind of smiling and his mouth is open as if he's talking. But of course, Snoopy doesn't talk, which is perfect for a silent comic strip. And then in the next panel, you see him flying in from the right side of the panel, almost perfectly horizontally, with his teeth bared and his paws up like he's attacking.
Yeah.
And
you think he's attacking, and you're like, why?
Yeah, it looks like he's attacking Lucy. But then in the next panel, he's back sitting right next to her, as if he just may have stopped in midair and fallen back down to the pavement and sat down on his haunches. And Lucy's thinking. She's got one hand on her chin and just a kind of thoughtful expression on her face. And then she's walking back to Schroeder's house, and her eye is kind of all right, I'm going to take care of this look on her face. And then next panel, she is jumping into the scene of Schroeder and Frida, just the way Snoopy did in the earlier panel. And I love Schroeder's expression. He's just so shocked to see this, and his shoulders are up and his eyes are wide, and his feet are kind of lifting off the floor almost. And Frida is horizontal to the floor, looking up at Lucy with shock on her face. Then you see Schroeder sitting at his piano, looking kind of puzzled, while there's a bunch of just swirls and stars and lines in front of him. Oh, and now this is also kind of a 3/4 view. Which still in 61, Schulz is doing a little bit. And then in the last panel, you see a beat up Lucy, but she's smiling and she's shaking hands with Snoopy, who looks kind of satisfied and happy that he helped her.
Yeah. It's amazing that there is no words in this strip at all. It's really an astonishing achievement of just silent comedy. There's some surprising things. I don't really think of Lucy collaborating. I don't know if that's the right word, or like conspiring with someone else, accepting someone else's help.
I guess it's just a measure of how off balance she is after this shock.
Yeah. But the moment of empathy is really a touching moment too, and it's really amazing how he depicts it with the joined word balloons. And that grass, that black grass, is the same for Snoopy and Lucy, and that's how you know that he's feeling the same way. And he has no reason to otherwise. He's not sad about his business. It's because the balloons are joined.
Right, yeah. If they were two separate balloons, you'd think he was upset about something else.
Yeah. It's like he's vibing. And, it's just so perfectly put together. And you're right, the horizontal leap is such a great, again, in that 2D world, is such a great choice. And it's just such a great comedic choice as well. Somehow everything's heightened. Nothing's wasted here. Everything adds to the tension, and then the final release, and then the punchline at the end. I think it's really great. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I was really impressed by this one. It's got a lot of panels, too. Peanuts doesn't usually have this many panels. I mean,
the ice one did for different reasons because of the cinematic action of it. But
the top tier has 3 where it usually had 2, and then you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 panels in the bottom 2 rows.
Right.
So that's a really amazing one, and it's just interesting to see Snoopy helping Lucy. I mean, that's not necessarily consistent with their usual relationship. Well, later on, you've got where he kisses her and she's like, I've been kissed by a dog. That becomes a trope later.
Right.
But Snoopy is still a bit doggier here in 61.
Yeah.
He's sitting there like a dog. He's not walking around on 2 legs so much yet. Now, there was one strip here so there were a number in this 5-year period I saw where they were silent except for the last panel. And I excluded those except for one, just because I thought it was so funny.
Okay.
It's October 18th of 59. It's, again, Schroeder at his piano, and for some reason, Sally is there. Now, Sally is still a baby at this stage, because she's just been introduced in recent months here. And she's got, a baby bottle. And the top tier 2 panels, she's drinking from the bottle. And then again in the beginning of the second tier. And then she puts the bottle down on Schroeder's piano and crawls away. And then Lucy comes in and just kind of, blank look on her face, and she takes her usual position leaning on the piano with the bottle right there behind her. And then there's a moment of realization of that bottle on the piano, and then she turns around completely and looks at it with her eyes wide, and then she says, "It always comes as a shock when it happens to someone you know." And it's just so funny because it's the line, it takes the guise of a serious adult situation, but it's not a serious situation at all.
Yeah. Were there a lot that were silent except for the last panel?
There were, I didn't count, but there were at least 4, 5, 6 others like this where it was silent until the end.
Huh. Okay. Interesting. Yeah, again, you don't know where it's going. The punchlines of some of these were really well staged, of course, because it's Peanuts, but you really don't know until the last panel there's a lot of weirdness going on until the very end, and then suddenly then the gag hits. It's really good.
Mm-hmm. Okay, in the characters facing adversity, this is really late in the period, November 26, 61, where Snoopy is making his way home in the rain. And, you see him through the strip. It's raining the whole time, and he's, getting under bushes or in a doorway or under Lucy's umbrella in one panel, or under Violet's umbrella in another one, or under an awning. And he gets home to the doghouse, and he's laying on top of the doghouse in the rain.
Miserable.
And he looks, completely normal, just lying there on top of the doghouse, even though it's... And, he was making this effort to stay dry all the way home, and now he's just lying there in the rain.
Yeah. This one was really amazing. Again, you have no idea what the punchline is going to be. You think it's just about this dog trying to get home dry, going from umbrella to umbrella or awning to umbrella or whatever. And then suddenly there's a real Peanuts misery, suffering panel at the very end. It almost felt like it should have been Charlie Brown at the end or something, but it's got to be somebody that sleeps out under the rain.
But he doesn't seem miserable to me at all in that last panel, just because he's home. It doesn't matter anymore that it's pouring rain.
I guess so. He looked kind of sad to me, I guess, but I don't know. It was funny that it's just so funny that he went to all the effort. It's great visual. The strip is really great visually too, because the rain is so full on. The lines of rain coming down are really like when the baseball games got rained out. It's really, you're sucked into that world, and you can just feel how heavy the rain is. It's really remarkable. And for him to be laying out in it at the end, you just feel that too. I don't know why I read it as him suffering, maybe because I would just have read 30 other Peanut strips beforehand. But I guess he got one. He that's what he wanted, and he got it. So I guess you're right. It's maybe there's a degree of satisfaction there.
I wanted to talk just a little bit about November 27th, 1960. So this is the one where Snoopy is sitting on Linus's blanket, so he wraps the blanket around Snoopy and then spins him like a top. And it's an okay gag, but what I noticed, and this is a typical Peanuts thing, where as Linus is working on wrapping this around Snoopy, he's got his tongue at the corner of his mouth, which is, kind of the Peanuts symbol of concentration on a task.
Right,
and I think as a kid, I would do that occasionally just because it was imitating Peanuts. Because, Peanuts was one of the earliest things I read. I was a preschooler looking at a Peanuts book, a book called You're You, Charlie Brown, that came out in the late 60s.
Okay. Was that one of the paperbacks, or was it in a different format?
So it wasn't one of the like pocketbook types. It was a little bit bigger, and it had like 2 strips on a page, each one arranged as a square, or there might be a whole Sunday on one. But yeah, it was a little bigger. I'm not sure what the size was exactly, but then I think they would put out those bigger books, and then they would kind of cut them up and put them into 2 or 3 of the pocketbook versions, I think.
Right.
But I had mostly the pocketbook ones. The what are they called? They're not trade paperbacks. They're the other kind. I forget what the designation is. Anyway, yeah, just the tongue at the mouth. The corner of the mouth is interesting.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Linus on the Rocking Horse. This is June 29th of 58.
Yeah, I really dug this one. So Linus is on a rocking horse, and basically he falls off, and because he just goes at it too hard.
Yeah, he's working way forward and way backward, and finally he just wipes out.
He's really getting into it. He falls off, and so he's dressed as a cowboy. He's got like a scarf on and a cowboy hat, and maybe in the last year you learn that the scarf is his blanket because he unties it. And then he puts the crushed cowboy hat back on, and he sucks his thumb. And it's this return to security after the trauma of falling off the horse for having too much joy from it. There's something about that moment about how he's like, he doesn't freak out. He's dazed. There's a panel where he's dazed on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like he would freak out, but instead he returns to security. Get your blanket, put your thumb in your mouth, puts the hat back on, and then it's kind of normal again. Or
although in that last panel, he's got a line over his eyes, like he's a little miffed about the whole thing.
Yeah. But I love the way he just goes back to comfort step by step. Like there's no chaos about it. He just does exactly step by. Get the blanket, get the thumb, get the hat. It's just like. It was really funny to me the way it was so systematic.
Mm-hmm. And as he's untying the blanket from around his neck, he's got the tongue at the corner of his mouth again.
Yes, yeah, and just the reveal that the scarf was the blanket was so funny to me too. Yeah.
Well, that blanket is very versatile.
Yeah.
So why don't we wrap up with that? June 18th of 61, where... Oh,
we didn't do the... hang on a second, what about the sleeping bag one? I think you flagged that one too, right?
Oh, yes, I did.
So you labeled that as a cute vignette. I actually think it's more than a cute vignette. I think it belongs in the Peanuts cruelty category. So Charlie Brown happily, joyfully, takes his sleeping bag out to sleep in the backyard under the stars. He's such a happy kid. He's going to sleep out under the stars. It's going to be a great night. Unrolls his bag. He's all raring to go. Climbs into the bag. He hears the howling of wolves. He gets scared. He runs back into the house. Then he looks back outside and he sees Snoopy sleeping in his sleeping bag.
This is August 11th of 57.
Such a great punchline. I did not... You kind of forget that it's much like the one where Schroeder ends up with the blanket, with Linus's blanket on his head. You kind of forget that the other characters exist in the universe. And then to suddenly have Snoopy suddenly appear in the last panel, it's like, oh, of course, it was that guy. It's such a great bit, because you just kind of, you forget he always has all these tools to work with, all these people to bring in. It was just it was really, again, really well paced, really funny punchline, and really, again, demonstrates the cruelty of the Peanuts universe, where this kid was so happy that he was going to sleep out under the stars, and it got whipped away from him, deliberately tricked out of it by Snoopy. To me, it's astonishing. It's so mean and great.
And some of these strips, maybe you wouldn't have seen later in the run, but I thought this one, I mean, the art style is 57, but the gag could have been from 67 or 77. Right. It just feels like such a Peanutsy gag.
Right. Oh, what was the other one you wanted to get to?
So June 18th of 61, the baseball one.
Oh yeah. This is the other one that I really like too. So they're playing baseball. Charlie and Snoopy are in the outfield. A ball is flying through the sky. They're looking up at it. That's how we know a ball's coming. And they run. They run for ages. They run through the whole neighborhood.
Jump
and as
over
I
a
mentioned
fence,
before,
running between houses. Yeah.
running behind houses, like forwards, like towards the audience, which was a shocking moment, as I mentioned earlier, kind of. And then finally, we get a panel where the ball hits Charlie Brown's glove, bounces off of it. It's all in one panel. We can see through the motion lines. It bounces off the glove and lands in Snoopy's mouth. Snoopy, who's lying on his back on the ground for some reason.
With a sound effect, clomp.
Yeah, clomp. And then in the final panel, we see the rest of the team cheering and carrying Snoopy on their shoulders, not Charlie Brown, who's left depressed and miserable that
Sighing.
He's not getting the glory for having caught the ball. I love the insult of him lying on his back and catching the ball. Not only did Snoopy catch the ball, he was lying on his back and caught it in his mouth. Not even in his hands. In his mouth, on his back. It's like a triple insult. On a rebound, he catches it, and he's the one that gets all the glory. Amazing. Yeah. And no dialogue. There's no good grief or anything in there. It all just works so perfectly.
There's a sigh, but that's not really
yeah, that's right.
dialogue.
But you really get the sense of misery.
Well, yeah, Peanuts. A lot of Peanuts is funny misery.
Yeah.
Or sometimes it's not even necessarily funny; it's just misery, and yet somehow people like reading it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, like I said, we didn't get to all 25, but they will all be linked in the show notes.
Yeah.
So,
and I find some of those Linus and Snoopy ones they're fine in terms of cartooning, but the punchlines are not really. Oh, they're both a mess at the end of it or something.
Yeah.
You know, it's not. It's not even like Spy versus Spy. It's I don't know. It's just another take on fighting over the blanket.
right? Yeah. Some of them are not particularly clever. But he was still kind of getting started. Well, getting started. I mean, he started in 1950. But it's interesting how long it takes to really develop into what we think of as Peanuts. I mean, it's kind of there in the late 50s, but it's still there's still a lot more development to come at that point.
Yeah.
Where the other podcast is Unpacking Peanuts in 62. I mean, you're seeing developments every year. And in fact, I was just listening to part 2 of their 1962 discussion and pointing out how 62 is really the start of Snoopy acting kind of cool and aloof.
Right.
Where, you don't see that before, where he's just kind of a regular dog, more or less. But yeah, I think you're 62, you're kind of on the way to eventually, like Joe Cool.
Yeah, right.
Even though that doesn't come for about 10 years, I think. But
right.
But yeah, the whole Joe Cool idea fits into the character that Snoopy's established to be by that time.
Yeah.
Anyway, but yeah, it was fun to do this, and maybe we can do the next chunk of 5 years if there are more silent strips, or approach it from a different angle next time. Or just do our own Peanuts podcast. Yeah, I need another podcast to do. Peanuts collections are published by Fantagraphics, and of course, as you can see from the links in our show notes, the entire run of nearly 50 years of Peanuts is available for free at gocomics.com. You can help the Deconstructing Comics family of podcasts by joining us on Patreon at patreon.com/deconcomics. And go to deconstructingcomics.com to connect to us on Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube, to shop on Amazon to support the show, and to find links to subscribe to the podcast. Our theme is by J.B. Anderton. If you're looking for some constructive feedback on your comic, send it to us and we'll critique it on our spin-off podcast, critiquing comics. Send it to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. We'll read it and record our critique. Next week, another vintage edition of our Patreon show, Tim Catches Up with the MCU, in which Mulele and I discuss 2016's Captain America Civil War. Till then, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Deconstructing Comics.